The thieves were in custody. The money was mostly recovered, and McHale was being congratulated by the local French authorities. "You see, Captain?" McHale smiled, handing Binghamton a soggy stack of bills. "We told you we'd get the money back." Binghamton looked at the money, then at McHale, then at the laundry-covered thieves. He sighed a long, weary sigh. 42,365. Binghamton muttered, starting to count the bills. 42,366. Carpenter, get me my pills. And a transfer to the infantry. I hear they don't have alligators in the desert. And as the PT-73 roared back toward Taratupa, the sound of laughter echoed across the Pacific, proving once and for all that you can take the pirate out of the ocean, but you can never take the ocean away from McHale's pirates. The end. Taratupa Tales, The Legend of McHale's Pirates. A comedy of errors, alligators, and admiral-sized blunders. Chapter 1, The Ghost of Garterbelt's Past. The tropical sun over the island of Taratupa didn't just shine. It leaned against you like a heavy, humid blanket soaked in diesel fuel and salt. For Captain Wallace B. Binghamton, affectionately known by his men as Old Lee Bottom, life on this island was a constant struggle between military protocol and the sheer, unadulterated madness of his command. Binghamton stood in his office, his face a shade of crimson that rivaled the local hibiscus. He was currently staring at his supply officer with an expression that suggested he was experiencing a gallbladder attack. "Garter belts!" Binghamton roared, his voice cracking like a dry reed. "Wow, wow, wow, wow. You are the supply officer here. If the nurses need garter belts, then you snap to it. You shake a leg. Oh, you know what I mean." The captain paced his office, clutching his stomach. Everything was on his shoulders. The war, the logistics, and now the intimate apparel of the medical staff. But garter belts were the least of his worries. A message had just arrived from Comfleet, and it carried a name that sent shivers down the spine of every officer who had ever misplaced a single mess kit, Admiral Iron Pants Rafferty. "He's arriving today on a sneak inspection," Binghamton whispered, his eyes wide with terror. "Iron Pants Rafferty is coming here. Do you realize what a mess this place is in? The sinks in the Petty Officers Club are backing up. Tokyo Rose probably has a better organized office than I do." Binghamton's stomach acid was currently strong enough to dissolve a battleship hull. He popped a handful of pills, ignoring the warnings of his aide, Lieutenant Carpenter. Suddenly, a spark of devious genius lit up his panicked eyes. "Wait a minute," Binghamton said, a slow, greasy smile spreading across his face. "If I were sick, terribly sick, I could appoint an acting base commander, and that poor fool would have to face Rafferty's wrath while I'm tucked away in the infirmary." Carpenter nodded eagerly. "Brilliant, sir. But who?" Binghamton's smile widened. "Not Julian, not Ninny. McHale, with Quinn McHale and his band of cutthroats in charge of Taratupa. They will run wild and destroy themselves right in front of the Admiral. It's perfect." "Sir, you look terribly ill already." Carpenter shouted, playing along. "Medic, Carmen, help. The captain is dying." Binghamton collapsed into his chair, groaning with theatricality that would have made a Shakespearean actor blush. The trap was set. Chapter 2, The Acting Base Commander. Lieutenant Commander Quentin McHale entered the infirmary with the relaxed stride of a man who owned the island and everyone on it. Beside him stood Ensign Charles Parker, a man whose primary contribution to U.S. Navy was a state of constant, vibrating anxiety. "Oh, McHale," Binghamton moaned from his bed, his eyes fluttering. "I'm in bad shape. Bad shape. The medics, they don't know if I'll make it." McHale suppressed a grin. He knew Binghamton's deathbed routines better than the back of his own hand. "Gee, Captain, that's terrible. Parker, and I will give Lieutenant Carpenter all the help he needs while you're recovering." "No," Binghamton barked, suddenly sitting up with alarming vigor before remembering he was supposed to be dying. Carpenter is a boob. I'm appointing you the acting base commander, McHale. Parker's eyes nearly popped out of his head. The skipper? Acting base commander? And Parker, Binghamton added, pointing a trembling finger, you're the acting executive officer. Now get over to my office and take command this minute. That's an order. Out! Out! As they left, McHale leaned toward Parker. Chuck, something is fishy. Old Lead Bottom giving us his chair? He's setting us up for a fall. But the chaos of command was already beginning. Within minutes of taking the captain's chair, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. The sinks were still backed up. The petty officers were complaining. And then there were the garter belts. Executive Officer Parker here. Parker squeaked into the phone. What? The Seabees are building the new rifle range? And the Arab is in the middle of it? Tell them to keep their heads down. Meanwhile, McHale's crew, the pirates of the PT-73, saw the captain's absence as a divine mandate for a party. Gruber, Virgil, and the rest of the boys had already organized a hula wingding in the air raid shelter. The skipper said full speed ahead. Gruber told the boys, misinterpreting a completely unrelated order. Open up the store window. We're in business. The air raid shelter was quickly transformed. Grass skirts were distributed. Moonshine was poured. And a group of local girls began a rhythm that was decidedly non-military. The party was in full swing when the news hit. Iron Pants Rafferty's plane had touched down. Chapter 3, The Hula Incident. Admiral Rafferty did not walk. He marched with the percussive force of a pneumatic drill. He arrived at the base looking for order and discipline. Instead, he found McHale wearing a native lei over his uniform. Welcome to Teratupa, sir. McHale saluted with a grin. Acting Base Commander McHale at your service. Rafferty stared at the lei. What the devil is that thing around your neck? An old native custom, sir. McHale lied smoothly. Sign of respect for visiting royalty. Rafferty grunted. I heard Binghamton was in the hospital. I'll pay my respects, and then we begin the inspection. In the infirmary, Binghamton was practically vibrating with excitement. He knew the hula girls were in the shelter. He knew the base was a shambles. He just needed to point Rafferty in the right direction. Admiral, Binghamton cried as Rafferty entered. I'm at death's door. But you must go to the air raid shelter. McHale has turned it into a Roman orgy. Hula, girls, disgrace. McHale, standing behind the Admiral, coughed. He's delirious, sir. Combat fatigue. He thinks he sees girls everywhere. I am not delirious. Binghamton screamed. There are girls in the closet. There are girls in the laundry. The Admiral, looking skeptical, opened the infirmary closet. Out stepped a nurse in a swimsuit, followed by an embarrassed Lieutenant Carpenter. Captain, Rafferty said, his voice cold enough to freeze salt water. I'd like an explanation, and it better be good. He did it. Binghamton pointed at McHale. He's sneaking women around and shoving them in places. Rafferty turned to McHale. Commander, shall we proceed with the inspection? We'll start with the laundry. Binghamton's face went white. No, not the laundry. The air raid shelter. The girls are in the air raid shelter. By the time they reached the shelter, McHale's crew had moved with the speed of light. The girls were gone. The moonshine was hidden, and Ensign Parker was leading a frantic, high-intensity fire drill. Fire drill. 100% successful, sir. Parker shouted, his face covered in soot. Rafferty looked at Binghamton, who was now dressed in the seaman's uniform he'd stolen to sneak out of the hospital. Binghamton, why are you running around in that uniform? Screaming about girls? It's clear you need a long rest, perhaps in a facility with very soft walls. Chapter 4, The Sultan of Marami. Just as the smoke cleared from the Rafferty debacle, a new crisis arrived in the